Hey guys! So in the last few lessons, we saw that by using JSX, we were able to insert HTML into JavaScript. And this ability came from JSX. But JSX actually lets us go even further than that. It actually lets us add HTML inside a JavaScript file and then insert JavaScript inside that HTML. But in order to learn more about this, we need to go deeper. Head over to the course resources if you want to get the starting file for this lesson and work alongside with me. Starting out, I've got a very simple React app. I'm importing React and React DOM, and then I'm using React DOM to render a single H1 onto the root div. So from here, let's say that I had a variable that I wanted to insert, right? Let's say I had a const called name, and the data stored inside this constant is just my name. Instead of saying hello world, what if I wanted to say hello Angela? Now, I can't just simply use the name of this constant. I can't just say hello name because it's just going to be interpreted as literally a string. Because we're inside a JSX file, if we simply add the name of the variable or the constant inside as a child of an HTML element, it's just going to interpret it as a string. So what do we have to do instead? Let's think about this. We're currently inside a JavaScript file, index.js, and we can write JavaScript code, which is pretty reasonable. But then using JSX, by installing the React module, we were able to inject HTML inside our JavaScript file. Now, if we wanted to insert JavaScript code inside the HTML, inside the JavaScript file, then what we have to do is to simply wrap the JavaScript inside a set of curly braces. And notice how as soon as I did that, it knew that I was talking about the name constant rather than just the string name. And it pulled that data over from here and inserted it into my H1. So why don't you have a go at this? Create a new constant with your lucky number. So that could just be a simple value that you pick. And then create a paragraph that's going to be rendered that says your lucky number is, and then insert that constant or variable into that paragraph element and achieve something that looks a bit like this. So pause the video and give that a go. All right, so we've got a new constant that I'm going to call num, and I'm going to set it to my lucky number. Let's just say it's 7. I actually think that all the numbers are pretty lucky, but let's go ahead and add that number into a paragraph tag. So your lucky number is this particular number constant. Let's not worry about all the syntax errors we're getting. We're going to be getting a lot of problems. We're not quite done yet. So the first issue that we have to solve is the fact that we've got 2 HTML elements, right? So in order for this to work, we of course need to wrap this inside a div. So we end up with a single HTML div element that's being rendered onto the screen. And if I hit save, it'll nicely reformat this for me so I can see it a little bit better. But I don't want it to read my lucky number is num. I want instead the actual constant's value to be rendered here. So I'm going to wrap that constant name, which of course is JavaScript and not HTML, inside a set of curly braces in order to get my compiler to interpret this as actual JavaScript. Now, you can go much further than this because once you open up a set of curly braces, you can actually create any JavaScript expression. So if instead of using a constant that doesn't change, I could write some maths, right? 3 plus 4 is still 7, or 3 plus 9 is 12. And I can get this code inside here to be evaluated and worked out and then inserted into my HTML. And if you wanted to go even further, we could actually generate a random number here, right? We could use math.random and then add a set of parentheses. We've got a random number, which is very small. So let's make it between 1 and 10 by multiplying it by 10. And then let's round it down using the floor method and then wrap that math.random multiply 10 inside that. And we end up with a new random number. And notice how every time I refresh this, I'll get a new number between 0 and 9. Now remember that I said you can add any JavaScript expression in between these curly braces, which is injecting code into our HTML elements in our JSX file. But we can't write JavaScript statements. So what do I mean by that? I can't, for example, decide to write if name is equal to Angela, will then return 7, but else if name is equal to Jack, then return 12 or something like this, right? This doesn't work because this is actually a statement rather than an expression. And the big difference between expressions and statements is that an expression will be evaluated to a value, right? Like it ends up, after all the code's been executed, it ends up equaling something. But this instead is actually asking the computer to do some work, to evaluate this statement, and then, depending on that statement, work out something. Now, if you want a bit more detail on expressions versus statements in JavaScript, there's a really good video that I recommend, and I've linked to it in the course resources. So take a look at this video if you're still not quite clear on what is the difference between statements and expressions. So let's go ahead and delete our JavaScript statement, and then we can replace it with a value or with an expression. So let's think about another situation. Let's say that I wanted this to say my full name, right? I wanted to say my first name is equal to Angela, but my last name is equal to you. And I want this to write hello, Angela, space you, or whatever it is that your name might be that you've added in here. So pause the video and see if you can work out how to do this. All right, so as with all of these challenges, there are 1,000,001 ways of achieving the same outcome. And as long as you achieve the goal, then consider yourself successful. So in this case, I've got 2 constants instead of 1. I've got a first name and a last name, and I want them both to be rendered in my H1. Now, one of the ways you could do this is to add a f name as JavaScript, and then use the plus sign to concatenate a space, and then the plus sign to concatenate the L name onto here. So this is all valid JavaScript. This is something that you might see in any sort of JavaScript functional method. And we end up with my full name added in here to the H1 with a space. Now, alternatively, you might have thought of some other ways of doing this. You could, for example, use our curly braces to add our first name, and because everything inside our H1 is interpreted as a string, we could just add a space in here and then add another set of curly braces and add a last name in here. So that works just as well. You're not limited to a single set of curly braces when you want to inject your JavaScript. And in ES6, we have something called template literals. Or if you come from another language, you might know it as string interpolation. So basically injecting strings into a piece of JavaScript. So the way we would do that is add a set of backticks, and in between the backticks, we can add a $, and then another set of curly braces. And inside here, we can add a piece of JavaScript. So let's add our f name in here. And then we can add a space, which is going to be interpreted as a normal string. And then let's add another variable, which is our last name. And now we've got our template literal. So let's just recap here. We've got this part interpreted as a string using the ES6 template literals. And then we've got that string being inserted in as JavaScript in these curly braces from JSX. And then it's being inserted as a string into our H1. And then that's being inserted as JavaScript code into a JavaScript file. So I don't actually like this code very much because I think we're now at some sort of inception level of depth, and I think it's confusing. The easiest way to achieve this task is probably just to add a space and add our last name and first name in here, like so. But I wanted to run through some of the different options and catch some of the methods that you might have tried. So we're going to be getting a lot of practice with JSX and adding JavaScript expressions into HTML, adding HTML into JavaScript, and getting to grips with JSX. But this is a good time to pause the video and have a mess around with this code if there are parts that don't make sense. So perhaps have a go trying some of those different methods that I mentioned in this lesson, or have a go at trying to add some expressions in between the curly braces. But you've now got access to this completed code, the JavaScript expressions in JSX completed, if you head over to the course resources and click on this link. But once you're ready and once you're comfortable with this idea, then head over to the next lesson, and I've got a challenge for you to be solved using JavaScript expressions in JSX. So for all of that and more, I'll see you there.